It is 6 in the morning in the humid suburb of Pinecrest, Florida. The streetlights are just flickering off as a convoy of unmarked black sedans rolls silently into the neighborhood. Heavily armed federal agents, wearing tactical vests over windbreakers, swarm across the manicured lawn. They move with the aggressive speed of a team hunting a violent fugitive or a domestic terrorist. The silence of the morning is shattered as they breach the front door, shouting commands that echo through the sleeping house. They are looking for a dangerous enemy of the state. But when they kick open the door to the primary target's room, they do not find a militia leader. They find a messy bedroom littered with comic books and empty soda cans. The threat to national security is a 15-year-old boy rubbing the sleep from his eyes in his pajamas. The agents wrestle the confused teenager to the floor, handcuffing his thin wrists behind his back. His parents stand in the hallway, paralyzed by shock, watching the government seize their son. The boy is Jonathan James, and he has just become the first juvenile cybercriminal to be hunted by the FBI. To understand why a tactical team is raiding a child's bedroom, we must look at the weapon he used. It sits on his desk, humming quietly. A standard, beige, compact Presario computer. With this simple machine, he has systematically dismantled the security of the most powerful military on Earth. Let's pause the action and examine the digital architecture he conquered. His first target was the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. This is a division of the Department of Defense responsible for analyzing threats regarding nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. It is supposed to be a fortress. The DTRA network is built like a medieval castle with concentric circles of security. The outer walls are firewalls designed to block unauthorized traffic. The inner keep holds the servers containing sensitive data about military personnel and defense logistics. Most hackers bounce off the outer wall. Jonathan, using the handle Comrade, did not try to smash the wall. He found a loose brick. He installed a back door into a server in Virginia, creating a secret tunnel that bypassed the security checkpoints entirely. Once inside, he was invisible to the administrators. He installed a piece of software known as a sniffer. This program acts like a digital wiretap. It sits silently on the network, recording every piece of data that passes through the Ethernet cables. It captures usernames, passwords, and emails in plain text, unencrypted and vulnerable. For weeks, the sniffer collected data. Jonathan sat in his bedroom, scrolling through thousands of internal military messages. He had total administrative access. He could read the private correspondence of generals and defense strategists, effectively turning the Department of Defense's own network into his personal news feed. But mere observation was not enough for his curious mind. He wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole went. He used the stolen credentials to hop from one military server to another, mapping the network infrastructure of the United States government like a cartographer. His arrogance grew with every successful login. He felt untouchable, a ghost in the machine. He did not realize that every digital footprint he left was being logged, not by the administrators he tricked, but by a silent, automated intrusion detection system deep in the core. He turned his sights to a new, even more critical target, the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. This facility is the brain of NASA. It manages the development of rocket propulsion and, critically, the systems for the International Space Station. Jonathan breached the NASA servers with ease. He bypassed the login screens and gained root access to the mainframe. He began downloading files, massive amounts of proprietary source code. The data transfer was slow, ticking up percentage by percentage as he sat back and watched. The files he stole were worth nearly $2 million, but their value wasn't just monetary, they were operational. He had seized the source code that controlled the life support systems of the International Space Station. He held the environmental controls of astronauts in his hands. The download triggered an alarm in Huntsville. NASA engineers noticed a massive spike in data egress. Someone was bleeding their servers dry. When they realized which specific files were being taken, panic set in. The intruder had the potential to manipulate the station's physical environment. They had no choice. NASA administrators made the unprecedented decision to physically pull the plug. They shut down the entire computer network at the Marshall Space Flight Center. For 21 days, NASA's digital brain went dark to purge the infection, costing taxpayers $41,000. The FBI's cyber division was immediately notified. They teamed up with military investigators from the Pentagon. They assumed they were tracking a foreign intelligence agency. The sophistication of the breach, the specific targets, and the tools used pointed to state-sponsored espionage from Russia or China. The investigators began the tedious process of tracing the signal. Jonathan had routed his connection through multiple proxy servers to mask his location. He bounced his signal from Miami to Virginia, then to Alabama, creating a digital maze intended to confuse the trackers. However, Jonathan made a classic error. In his haste to download the NASA files, he failed to scrub the logs of a specific server. The FBI analysts found a tiny thread, a connection to a Bell South internet service provider in South Florida. They pulled the subscriber records for that IP address. They expected to find a shell company or a fake identity. Instead, the records pointed to a residential address in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. The name on the account was a regular civilian. Agents were deployed to set up physical surveillance on the house. They sat in sweltering vans, drinking stale coffee, watching the driveway through telephoto lenses. They waited for a spy to exit the home. Instead, they saw a teenager with a backpack walking home from school. The dissonance was confusing. Could this kid be the CRM raid who humiliated the Pentagon? To be sure, they obtained a warrant to tap the home's telephone line. They needed to hear him admit to the crimes before they could move in for an arrest. The wiretap confirmed their fears. They recorded the boy bragging to his friends about the hack. He described the directory structures of the military servers with perfect accuracy. He laughed about how easy it was to guess the passwords of high-ranking officials. The decision was made to raid the house. They needed to secure the hardware before he could wipe the hard drives. The tactical team was briefed. They were told to treat the suspect as dangerous, not physically but digitally. Every second he was online was a risk. This brings us back to the moment of the arrest. The agents bag the computers, the notes and the handheld gaming consoles. Jonathan is escorted out of his house in front of his neighbors. He looks small, frail, and completely out of place in the grip of federal agents. In the interrogation room, the atmosphere is heavy. Jonathan is calm. He explains to the agents that he didn't want to hurt anyone. He claims he was just looking around, exploring the systems to see how they worked. He calls it a challenge. He even tells them that he sent an anonymous email to the Pentagon after the breach. He listed the security flaws he found and offered to help them fix the holes. He thought he was doing them a favor. The Department of Justice did not see it that way. The legal system faced a dilemma. Jonathan was a minor. There was no precedent for a juvenile hacking case of this magnitude. If he were an adult, he would face decades in federal prison for espionage and theft of government property. The media caught wind of the story. Jonathan became known as the super hacker. To the public, he was a genius who outsmarted the government. To the establishment, he was a terrifying example of how vulnerable their systems truly were. After a tense legal battle, a plea deal was struck. Jonathan James was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and probation until he turned 18. He was banned from using computers. The boy who lived on the internet was now exiled from it. Part of his punishment was to write letters of apology to NASA and the Department of Defense. It was a humiliating exercise for a brilliant mind. He sat at his kitchen table, handwriting letters to the people whose systems he had effortlessly conquered. The house arrest was a psychological cage. For Jonathan, the computer was his connection to the world, his identity, and his social circle. Without it, he fell into a deep depression. He felt targeted, watched, and misunderstood by a system that only saw him as a criminal. The FBI, however, learned a valuable lesson. They realized that their greatest threat wasn't always a foreign army. It was curiosity. They began to overhaul their recruitment, realizing they needed minds like Jonathan's to defend against people like Jonathan. The story should have ended there, with a lesson learned and a young man moving on. But the label hacker is a tattoo that never fades. Jonathan tried to live a normal life, but law enforcement never took their eyes off him. He remained a person of interest. Years later, in 2008, a massive cyber attack hit TJX Companies, a major retailer. Millions of credit card numbers were stolen. It was the largest data breach in history at the time. The Secret Service immediately looked at their list of known hackers. They raided Jonathan's house again. They found no evidence linking him to the crime, but they were convinced he was involved. They interrogated him, pressured him, and threatened to send him to prison for a crime he swore he didn't commit. The pressure was relentless. Jonathan was now a young adult, and he knew that with his past record, he wouldn't get a fair trial. He felt the walls closing in. The justice system that had labeled him a villain was coming back to finish the job. The psychological weight became too much to bear. He believed that no matter what he did, he would always be the villain in the government's narrative. He wrote a final letter, not to the FBI, but to his family and the world. In the letter he wrote, "I have no faith in the justice system. Perhaps my actions today and this letter will send a stronger message to the public. Either way, I have lost control over this situation, and this is my only way to regain control." On May 18, 2008, Jonathan James took his own life. He was 24 years old. The tragedy shocked the hacking community. It was a grim, violent end to a story that began with a teenager's intellectual curiosity in a quiet bedroom. Subsequent investigations suggested that Jonathan was indeed innocent of the TJX hack. The true perpetrators were a different ring of cybercriminals. The government had hounded a retired hacker to his death based on a past reputation rather than current evidence. The legacy of Jonathan James is complex. He exposed the fragility of the information age. He showed that the US military's digital borders were porous, protected by arrogance rather than actual security. He forced a complete redesign of federal cybersecurity. Because of him, the government now employs red teams, ethical hackers who are paid to break into systems to find flaws. They institutionalize the very behavior they punished Jonathan for. They realized that to be secure, they had to think like the attacker. The tools he used, the sniffer and the backdoor scripts, are now standard subjects in cybersecurity courses. Students study his methods not to replicate his crimes, but to understand the mechanics of network vulnerability. He is a chapter in every textbook, but his story also serves as a darker warning about the relationship between the state and the individual. It highlights the danger of a justice system that cannot distinguish between a curious child and a malicious spy. It asks what we do with talent that breaks the rules. The bedroom in Pinecrest is empty now. The computers are long gone, evidence in a file that is gathering dust. But the digital world Jonathan helped shape is everywhere. It is in the phone in your pocket and the server managing your bank account. We live in the reality that Jonathan James proved was possible. A reality where power is not physical, but digital. A world where a single person, armed with nothing but a keyboard and a question, can bring the machinery of a superpower to a halt. The concentric circles of the DTRA are stronger now. NASA's firewalls are thicker. But the fundamental truth remains. No system is perfect. There is always a loose brick. There is always a back door for someone patient enough to find it. The silence of that morning raid in Florida still echoes. It reminds us that the frontier of modern warfare is not a distant battlefield. It is right here in our homes, connected by invisible threads to the centers of global power. Somewhere, right now, another teenager is sitting in the glow of a monitor. They are scanning a network, looking for a gap, watching a cursor blink. They are wondering what will happen if they type the next command. The government is watching, waiting for them. The cycle continues. The defenders build higher walls, and the curious kids build taller ladders. It is a war that will never end, fought in the silence of the digital void. Jonathan James was the first casualty of this new war. He showed us the future, and then he was consumed by it. His story is a testament to the power of the mind and the terrible price of knowing too much. So the next time you hear about a data breach or a government hack, remember the boy in the pajamas. Remember the black vans on the quiet street, and ask yourself, who is really in control of the world we have built?